Running a board election in past years used to be so simple. The association would look at its bylaws, would figure out just by reading its bylaws what's required, have the nomination forms go out, make sure that the ballots are sent out in the proper fashion, make sure the meeting notice goes out properly, the right amount of people are there so that you can have the election, or what we call a quorum. Have those ballots cast, have those ballots counted, and those who had the most votes were the winners. Well, then what happened is there was a lot of incidents of lack of transparency. What do we mean by that? Well, what was happening is a lot of people were finding it very difficult to run for the board. They had to run through hoops. So the state had to come into play, and they passed legislation that really makes it really simple to run for an election. All that really needs to be done now is you be a person who owns a home in that community and you're in good standing. There's a definition for good standing in the law that's pretty simple, but that's really all that's needed, and you get to either run for the board or vote in a board election. So in 2017, New Jersey decided, with some good cause, that there was a need to have more of a statutory stake here. That requires now that there's parameters by which all associations have to be governed by. No longer do the bylaws establish the process. It's now more by statute. This statute we know here as the Radburn Law. The ultimate goal of the Radburn Law is if you want to run for the board or if you want to vote in a board election, you should be able to. Pretty simple, right? We do live here in America. The vote is very important, and that's what Radburn, strived to do. What the Radburn Law established is there's really one thing only that one has to be in order to either run for the board or vote in an election, and that is to be in good standing. Everything else falls by the wayside. If you're in good standing, you get to run for a board position or vote in the board election. They then authorized the Department of Community Affairs to promulgate some additional regulations to fill in some of the holes. Most legislation can be very broad. What the Department of Community Affairs did was to start doing some surgical strikes with certain things in the law to make it more specific. Those came into play in 2020. So while the Radburn Law, its intent is certainly heroic, and we should try and follow, its intent, unfortunately, the regulations, when they came out in 2020, is causing some confusions. There are areas in there that conflict with the law. As a result of that, you may get many different opinions from many different attorneys how the Radburn Law should be impacted upon or impactful upon your community. So there's a magic number of 50 that's in the law. Not quite certain where it came from, but we've found that most of our communities are over 50 units. So there's a pretty good chance that was the rationale behind it. If you're over 50 units, there are certain timelines that you have to meet when you do what we call a call for candidates. And then there's certain timelines that you have to meet once you have the election set forth. One of the peculiar instances that is a conflict within both the regulations and the law is if there are multiple terms available for somebody to choose to run for. For example, if you have terms that are typically 2 years, but somebody vacated a seat because they moved or they passed away and you have 1 year left on that term, by law, that seat has to go up during the next annual election. So now you've got potentially 2 seats for 2-year terms, 1 seat for 1-year term. What are you supposed to do? The way we interpret the regulations is as a candidate, you must choose which term you wish to run for. One other thing that the law also requires, not so much that it's odd in and of itself, but I think to sort of follow what happens with our normal elections here, both state and national, is you must have as many number of write-in lines for the number of seats that are up. So if you have 3 seats that are up for that year, you must also have 3 write-in lines so that people can write in a candidate if they choose to do so. So the main takeaway that we tell our clients is this is hard material, and you really need to get a really good sense of what you're dealing with, which is why we always suggest get your attorney involved. That's his or her responsibility is to understand the law. Even though I had said earlier that it does pose even some problems for attorneys, I think we're best placed to help our clients. So if you have a question about an election, give us a call here at Stark & Stark because we're very informed about the law and we're here to help you.